It says recording. So here we go. Hello, everybody. This is something I don't normally do. And I wanted to introduce some people here and just have a little bit of a discussion. I have a couple questions, and maybe this little meeting here, impromptu, non-scripted at all, shares some other facets of the hobby, and gets other people interested. The reason I do say this is because there's a lot of people that, since these hurricanes and people, on YouTube channels and stuff making videos, people are running to get their license now. But then what now? What do I do? I got a license. There's no emergency. This is what's in this hobby for me. And I think everybody here that I'm looking at has one thing that they could at least add to that to say why they got a license. And I know all these people here that there's a diverse selection there on why. So it's not just a lot of people are making it like, get your ham radio license, do this, do this. When everything goes down, you got a ham license. But then nobody tells them, hey, you can talk to people, you could have fun, you could do things, you can interact and meet people in this hobby, and not just have this radio in your hand ready to go for when the crap hits the fan. So thank you all for coming along. I'll let y'all introduce yourselves real quick for everybody watching. This is not live, by the way, it's recorded. So I don't do good live. I stutter a lot. Go ahead. As on my screen, Mike's in the top left. So go ahead, Mike, introduce yourself.
Are you going to pick on me first? My name is Mike, K8MRD. I have just a tiny YouTube channel called HamRadioTube. And I've been licensed in 2016. And I don't know, what else do I say?
Well, he does have a really good channel. He does a lot of the stuff on the channels on his videos that I never have, like Parks on the Air. We call him Papa Poda. This guy will go and activate a park and turn it into a pileup across the world. He'll get into that in a little bit. For those who are interested, now that you got your license, what is one thing you can do? He'll explain what is, I think, really neat Parks on the Air. Pixie, go ahead. What got
Hi,
you
my
into the
name is,
hobby, and who are you? Tell us.
all right, my name is Pixie, KO4NEP. I live here in Vero Beach. My dad was a ham radio guy, he was an engineer, and I just wanted to get my license, and uh, I love the club. We have a fantastic club here in Vero Beach. And there's always something going on, and there's just a bunch of great guys, and the ham radio thing is really cool.
Cool. Richard, introduce yourself.
All right, guys. My name is Richard Ramsey, and to be honest, I was, introduced to this through my function at work. So, I was encouraged to get this technician license, and as I was going through the coursework and understanding more about it and the hobby side of it from some videos I've seen, some stuff that Eric's posted. I'm a lot more interested in it now as a hobby, even though I had to get it through work. But that's that's how I'm here for him.
Okay. My friend Chris, go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I just took my name's Chris Lewis. I just took the technician and general license. I don't have my call sign yet, but maybe in a couple of days I will. I was big in CB years and years ago. I was always running a CB and talking to people as I drove around, and I thought it was really cool, and I just kind of fell out of it. And then these hurricanes, I live in Florida, and these hurricanes came around, and I guess the first one, Helene, hit North Carolina in Nashville really hard. And my older brother lives in Hendersonville, which is right there. And so he was out of communication, obviously, right? He was out of power and no cell phone service and everything else. And I've always wanted to get a ham license, to get licensed. And that just was enough incentive to get it, because not having communication was pretty tough, not knowing what happened. So now that I have it, I'm now pushing him to get it. So I'm going to try to get it. But I got a radio while I was studying, and I see the camaraderie. Like it's a community, right? And it's pretty cool. And so I'm listening to these people talk, and I can't talk on the radio. So I'm listening to like these people talk from across the world, on D Star or whatever, what I'm listening to. And it's just fascinating. So it's pretty cool. It's grown into more than just communication to my brother in North Carolina. Not that that was the sole purpose, but that was enough incentive to get it. But it's developing into more. So it's pretty neat.
Pretty cool. Tom,
Yeah.
tell us your story, Tom.
Hey there. So my name is Tom, KF4YEY. I've been licensed for over 25 years, but I really only started using it in 2018 and forward when I needed to decide to renew my license on the 20th anniversary. And I needed to decide whether I was going to do it or drop it. And I said, you know what? I said, I'm going to do it. So I got my license renewed and did a field day um, for the first time in 2018. Enjoyed it a lot. Didn't think I'd stay up for 24 hours straight on field day. I thought I was going to go for a couple hours and come back home. And my wife says, "You coming back home?" And I says, "Oh no." I says, "I'm staying till the end. You guys can do your thing and survive." And so every year since then, I've done both field days, winter field day and summer field day when I can. Uh, so the first field day I did voice. Had my technician license the first field day. The second field day, I still had my technician license, but then decided to try my hand at CW. I learned CW for my novice license a long time ago, but never used it. It's very much like riding a bike. Once you learn how to ride that bike, you pick it back up relatively quickly. So with about 45 minutes of practice, the guys took me in there and we did I think I probably did about 10 contacts that first field day. And ever since that point, I was hooked. I do 90% of my operating is CW and 10% everything else. I'm mainly voice, and I tried FT8 once or twice. And my latest venture with this is I want to try to find a way to do JS8 call and WinLink over HF. Those are two of my latest ventures. And so, but in general terms, I mainly do contesting with CW. I don't always turn my entries into the contest, but I do have a lot of fun doing it. I need to turn them in more often with all these state QSO parties that I play in every now and again.
Right. So for Richard and Chris, the two newest newbies here, we'll call them, being licensed in the last week, field day is one of the things that I like the most. Pixie has been to a field day with me before several times, winter and summer. Mike, I know, has field days up there that they go to. And field days, basically, for those who are watching too that may not know, one thing is a field day. It's to encourage everybody to get out in the field somewhere you're not used to operating, like at your house, to set up, portable on emergency power, on solar power, and field deployable antennas, and set that up and make contacts in a 24-hour time frame. From usually like 2 p.m., whatever that UTC is, 2 p.m. Saturday, 2 p.m. Sunday at our Eastern, whatever. And basically, you'll have, like Tom was saying, the overnight guys. I used to be one of those. I would wait till they all petered out 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night to eat dinner. Everybody brings food. You all eat dinner. And like you said, Chris, camaraderie. Everybody's hanging out, working. There's 5 or 6 radios going at one time. Next thing you know, gets later at night. And your club is trying to make as many contacts as possible because they have a little point system for incentive. But I would stay up all night and do the voice contacts on the phone. You'd have one guy doing Morse code over here, CW, one guy doing digital. Then in the morning, you wake up, or everybody wakes up, they come, you're tired, you swap. It's a 24-hour event. But Pixie has seen that before. We've had some good time. 40, 50 people have showed up to a field day. And Orlando, Chris, you're in Orlando. There is huge groups there. Tom can tell you about that one day. Richard, there are clubs down there that have field day events, and it's everywhere. Ours is in Vero Beach, and that's one thing that I like as far as in this hobby is I look forward to field day, wintertime and summertime. Mike, anything on field day from you?
Yes. No, field day is great. It's some of the greatest camaraderie you'll have in ham radio because everybody just comes together and makes contacts and shoots the breeze for 24 hours. And yeah.
So Mike, I'm gonna pick on your brain here for a minute because here's another thing that if Richard or Chris are not maybe familiar with, Chris has been watching and stuff. I think Pixie has seen one of these or two. And for those watching, if you're brand new to ham radio, check this out. We call him Papa Pota, Parks on the Air, POTA. This guy, he'll tell you right now about Parks on the Air, and it's one thing in the hobby. Again, if you don't want to wait for field day all year, or there's no emergency, what else could you do? Mike, give us an idea on why you do that. Why is it so fun? What would you say to somebody who just got their license, who may be watching this, on why they should participate in something like Parks on the Air?
Well, so a little background. I mean, I got into ham radio because I wanted off-grid comms. Like, that was a thing for me. I lived through the big blackout of the Northeast in the early 2000s. We didn't have power for like a week. And after that, I'm like, I want comms. So I mean, fast forward a decade after that. But, getting your license is one thing, but actually practicing and being students of our craft is another. And being that, and I'm sure a lot of people in Florida, I'm from Florida originally. I was born in Fort Lauderdale. And right where the hurricanes in North Carolina hit, I spent a good portion of my life in Brevard, Hendersonville, Waynesville. My dad lived in Fines Creek, which is like Clyde. Like, I'm very attached to that part of North Carolina. And not having comms is not a good thing. But we get our ham radio license, and then you get an HT or something, and you're like, set it on a shelf. That's not what you want to do. So we can practice our craft and we can have fun at the same time, and Parks on the Air, for me, does that. So one, it's just fun. I love being outdoors and I love ham radio. So put the two together and you get two birds stoned at once. But what you're actually doing in Parks on the Air is you're building that muscle memory for setting up your station off grid. It's all, you take your radio and your antenna and a battery usually, and we set up out in the field and we get on HF radio and we make contacts. But when the stuff hits the fan, you don't have power. Now you know how to set up off grid and have comms, whether it's locally through some of the lower frequencies, having your antenna lower in the air so you can kind of have, within like a 300-mile radius kind of comms. So like from me, I'm north of Houston, Texas, on some of the frequencies, I could talk to people in Dallas. And it's just practicing, but you have to know different frequencies and what bands and frequencies are open during the day versus at night. There's all kinds of antenna stuff that goes along with that, but Parks on the Air is just a fun way to practice all of that. So, right. And for me, getting back to field day, field day used to be really, really fun. And I looked forward to it the first couple of years that I did it. But right around that same time, Parks on the Air, I think the first POTA video I ever did was in like 2018, which like nobody knew what Parks on the Air was back then. But I loved the rush of being the receiving end of a pileup when you throw out your call sign and you got 100 people all throwing out their call signs and you got to pick one and log them. I loved that. But field day is only twice a year, field day and winter field day. Well, Parks on the Air is field day every day. So if you just like that rush of being in an operation and having a huge pile up, you can do that. But I mean, you run it however you want. If you want to take it slow, you can do it that way. I'm more of a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. I just kind of want the contacts and see how many I can rack up and how far you can get. I mean, just yesterday morning, I was talking to Netherlands, England, Austria, Sweden. No, I think it was Switzerland, like all kinds of stations over Europe on 10 meters, 28 megahertz.
I could tell you
crazy.
that when I'm mobile and I'm just listening, there'll always be somebody calling CQ Parks on the Air.
Oh yeah, it's huge.
And it's huge. There's if you activate a park, and tell them about that real quick. If you activate a park, people all over the world are looking for you, and it's like shooting fish in a barrel. You want contacts all day long, you can get them.
It's pretty crazy because back when I started doing POTA, like I would be on the air for like an hour calling CQ just to make 10 contacts. So the goal is to make 10 contacts at a state or national park. And then you've officially activated the park, which gets you nothing. I mean, there's no, it's just a fun thing to do. Right. Yeah, if you're into statistics and stuff, there's every stat for everything you could possibly imagine. To me, I just go out and have fun. But I'm amazed now, like all those DX stations, those long distance European stations that we worked yesterday, those were all different countries who were actively hunting POTA stations. Like that's how big it has become. I used to get emails from people all around the world, like, how do I get into Parks on the Air? And I'm like, I don't know, go ask these guys. I'm just the guy that hits record on the camera and showed it to the world, you know. Um,
There's a
yeah, it's awesome. It's
there's
so awesome.
I'm still waiting to work the other Eric Hofer that lives in Switzerland, I think it is, and he's got the same
Oh,
name
is it
as me.
really?
Yes, and
So Mike,
Nice.
someone said, "Look who I just worked, Eric Hofer." I was like, "Whoa!" And so I reached out to him. He goes, "I've seen you too." He says, "I said, let's not schedule it. I just want to randomly find you
Right.
and do this."
How
And
cool would that be?
yeah, so
Yeah.
everybody's they're like, "Hey, you want my card from Eric Hofer?" No, that's not fun. I didn't make the contact. I want a card
Right.
from him. You
Right.
know. Let me switch gears for a second. Pixie, like you said, tell everybody. Let's say somebody, has. I hear this all the time. I got my license. I don't know if there's a club in my area, or how do I approach the club? I mean, you, like I said, stepped right into it, and you got your license. Raise your hand, by the way. Who used Ham Radio Prep to get their license? 3. Ham Radio. Now, real quick, what are you thinking about Ham Radio Prep? I mean, I pushed it for years. It's. I think
Awesome.
it teaches you about what you're studying for instead of what I did 20 years ago, reading out of a book and highlighting answers, and it didn't
Right.
make sense. I mean, it seems that all 3 of you, Pixie, Chris, and Richard, used Ham Radio Prep and got your license fast. I mean, Chris, you were what, a week or so,
Yeah.
and Pixie was a week.
I did both. I was going to do all 3, but I decided not to do all 3. I've got the extra scheduled for a month from now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pixie was 4 days from nothing to extra, and Richard was a couple months
Right.
because he had to juggle a work schedule and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But I don't think Pixie, Chris, or Richard touched the radio or even played on radio at all before that. Well, Chris, you were on CB like I am, like I
Yeah,
was,
right.
so you were
Yeah.
familiar. But Richard went from not even knowing what simplex is and how repeaters work to all of a sudden going through Ham Radio Prep, and
Right.
I mean, he'll talk in terms we can understand CTCSS and all kinds of stuff. So I think that's a really good service. You guys agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I was talking to somebody about ham radio, and I was saying stuff that I was surprised was coming out of me. I'm like, man, I really learned that stuff. So, yeah, I could actually talk when I knew what I was talking about. So I was impressed with myself for a little bit there.
So, Pixie, somebody that says, I may not have something in my area, or how do I approach a club? I mean, what did you do? How would you tell somebody that just got their license, that may be watching this, they got a license, they got a radio, they have no idea who to talk to, or if it's scary or whatever? What would you say, Pixie? Because I know you know everybody at the club now.
Yeah, you just go online, you find out whoever the closest club is to you, and you just contact them, and they probably have something going on. I know our club is very active, and I just showed up for breakfast like 2 days later, and that's when I met everyone. There were so many people there at breakfast, and they have weekly meetings. There's meetings all the time.
Tell
So
them
it's
how
very easy.
tell them how Jan and people like that bring a radio every time. They'll have something, and hey guys, check out this new radio, and they'll all play with it together, right?
Oh,
Everybody's
they're amazing. They always have something going on. They've always got different antennas, different radios. Some are over there at the table doing the CW. They're all just doing different things, and it's just a great time. Everybody is just has it. And then afterwards, they all go out to lunch, and they're all buddies. It's just a big, nice, happy group, and they talk about everything. Ham radio, everything else, and it's just a nice group to belong to
we
and to
almost
be
had a
friends with.
we almost had a classic car show going there when people started bringing classic car shows to be antennas over there and 1956 Thunderbirds over here and people's homemade motorcycles.
They never merged the two though, huh?
Right.
Classic cars with a bunch of antennas on it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I grew up in Detroit, man. That's my jam.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Tom, tell us, here's another thing I wanted to address here. Tell us real quick. People, I know several people that most of us here know, but, well, some of us do. They say, oh, well, nobody does Morse code anymore. What do you mean ham radio? You don't, it's all, ham radio is dead. Nobody uses Morse code. I know, and Mike could tell you, you can scroll down at any portion of the CW portion of every band, and there's Morse code everywhere. What do you think, Tom, about how many people today are using Morse code? And is it just for pleasure? Are they actually using it for emergency or disaster, or is it just people making contacts? Because I know, Tom, you do a lot of CWs. So what would you interject on that?
So it's all over the place, really. In my experience, I'm mainly a contester. I do some conversations. I probably do, one conversation for every 10 or 15 contacts that I do, but there is a facet of where they do, real deal, traffic passing and emergency handling and stuff like that. It does happen. There are scheduled nets for each state and national, and there's a whole coordinated schedule for those traffic nets. There's two groups that do it. One is the NTS, which is the ARRL one, and then there's some other group that does it. That's a sort of a third party group that's kind of sprung up and been doing it the last few years. And as far as CW operators out there, there's definitely quite a number, and I think that it's gotten more popular since the license requirements have been dropped than it probably was when the license requirements were there. I mean, on any weekend, you will find that there's any of these operations going on. POTA and even these state QSO parties bring them out, and there's these DX contests that happen, and one of the guys in the club, this local club, it's here in Orlando, is also a blind ham like myself, and he's been involved with this thing. I kind of joke with people. I tell these people, I says, this guy Dave, I says he knew CW before he knew English. I said he gets on the air every single day, and he's probably communicated with 3/4 of people that are alive that have done CW, because he does 90% CW as well, even more than I do. He has a dedicated beam and all that. I just operate, from the condo that I got here, and I have to take it up and put it down every time I want to operate. But um, he operates every day, and like I say, the field day thing, the club relies on us, because when we get on the air, uh, we don't mess around. I mean, we'll do 1,000 contacts easy on a field day, as long as the rain doesn't get us.
Yeah, I remember Dwayne, rest his soul. He used to
In
come to
fact,
field.
real quick, they did an article about us in QST a couple of years ago. I think it was the December edition of 23. I know 22. It was. If you guys locate that article.
Oh, Mike's got CW pulled up here on the screen
I
here.
mean, it looks really cool.
Right.
Yeah, CW I think is what I want to do when I learn Morse code finally. I'm probably never going to pick up a mic again, because you could get take out there 2 or 3 watts of power and a wire hanging in a tree and be working all over the United States or the world. Whereas with voice you have to have way more power and good band conditions. Would you agree, Tom? I mean, you could work the world with 2 or 3 watts if you wanted to with a little homemade transmitter.
In fact, one of the times that I did the Florida QSO party by myself, I did the challenge of doing it QRP style. I took my 100-watt radio and I dropped it down to 5 watts. And I did I only operated one day in the Florida QSO party that time. And I worked on 5 watts. I worked without moving the antenna at all, just a simple, 20-meter dipole on the like sort of the POTA setup where you got like mast at 20 feet in the air, and the things come down and you staple them into the ground or whatever with the tent stakes or whatever. Very simple, dipole, that sort of thing. I did Germany and Hawaii, so 6 hours to the east from a time zone perspective, so a quarter way around the world 1 minute, and a little while later I hit the Hawaii guys all on 5 watts.
Yeah, that's impressive. Richard, what have you what do you think about so far? Just these ideas of us bringing this stuff up. Like, I know one thing that you had mentioned, Richard, is you said, you wanted to have an ability to talk. Like a lot of people ask this question, like, how do I talk to my brother in Pensacola from Miami? Sometimes you can't, or you can if you want to use D-Star modes or internet enabled modes and stuff. But as far as now you got your license, I know you're a tech right now and you're just getting into the repeaters and stuff and taking it slow. It's fine. What do you think that you're going to want to do next? Just listening to some of the stuff with your ham license, or are you just going to kind of hang out as a tech just with a handheld? You know what I mean? Some people do that. Some people are not interested in doing any kind of worldwide or setting up antennas and building antennas. You know what I mean? What do you think, Richard?
Well, yeah, as far as like staying as a tech with a radio, I mean, for the meanwhile, I think that's where I'll probably be more so. But you did bring up something. We did talk about it. I asked you a while back about how I could probably, is it possible for me to like introduce my son to this hobby and have him set up something where he lives out of state and I have something set up where we can talk. Um, that would be interesting for me to try to get into, and that has piqued my interest a little bit. Maybe so he's young, so get him into the hobby. More so where I got into the hobby, forced into the hobby, and I'm finding out that it's like something that's pretty cool, and there's so much about it that you can go. There's so much to it that I didn't have an idea would exist. So um, I, I'm gonna pick at you about that particular thing, but
Yeah,
that's I think it's gonna go.
there's a ton of options there. I mean, different. I mean, depends on HOA standards and stuff like that, or what kind of there's certain bands like Mike was saying, certain bands during the day, certain bands during the night, certain bands are local, more local area, 300-400 miles, like 40 meters or whatever. Or you can also talk across the world on that. Whereas some bands 50 miles out, you can't hear each other, but it's easier to work 10,000 miles away than it is to work 60 miles away. Just depends on the ionosphere, but. I know Chris just went full in head first into the water and got a D75 Kenwood,
I did.
and now he's what are you looking at now? A 7300 or
7,300 and a 7,100. I want to. So I set up a antenna on my car so I could tie the HT to the antenna. But I was looking at a 7,100 for my car and a 7,300 for the house. But I'm not sure which one I'm going to go for yet. So
so
I'm going to get probably the mobile.
you're wanting to go all the way and set up an antenna at the house and do HF and everything, huh?
Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. Yeah.
And
Yeah, one thing I was going to say about the clubs is you can find clubs near you on the ARRL website. So if you go in there, they have a nice search feature so you can find clubs near you.
And those guys are always willing to help too. I mean, those are
Yeah,
just a bunch of really, really nice people. I mean, you just have to go ahead and reach out to them, and you just couldn't find a group of nicer people.
I agree. Yeah, they had during my testing, there was a couple clubs there, the Orlando and the Lake Monroe. And everybody was there for free, right? They're not getting paid to do that. And they're just so,
volunteering, yeah.
right. Yeah, they're just volunteers and it was really, everybody was really nice. So everybody I've met has been very helpful. Because coming into this, everybody's got questions, right? They don't know, what antenna should I get? What radio should I get? So it's interesting. When I got the D75, I didn't know how to find a frequency to listen to anybody. So I've come
And
along.
now I heard you said you're listening to StarNet now, so
Yeah,
you're
for sure.
listening
Yeah,
with the hurricanes that came through. You can listen to the whole
that
state
was
of
helpful.
Florida.
Yeah, for sure.
How many questions did you miss on the test, Chris?
Um, I think I missed three. The guy was joking, goes, "Are you familiar with these questions?" Because I went through them because I studied quite a bit, and yeah, it went pretty easy.
Hey, what'd you pass there, Richard?
Surprisingly, I got a 35 out of 35.
Nice.
They were questioning him too. They're like, "Yeah, we need to look over this again. You got everyone right."
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Every one of the five guys there, they were all nice. By the way, to piggyback on Lulu's statements, the nicest people ever.
Agreed.
But
Yeah.
they, all five of the guys, scored the test and were like, looked up and was like, I haven't seen that in a while. I was like,
Nice.
oh,
Good. Where'd you
Well,
take it?
all to that prep site. I just drilled down and took. I gotta say honestly, like maybe over 100 of the tests, just like every night, like
Wow.
after work, I'll
God.
do like while like in the bathroom or something like that, just have 10 minutes, I'll do a test and it'll just fly through to the point where I got to see all the questions.
Yeah.
So by the
The
time I
app
took
is very
the test,
helpful
it
for
was
sure.
like, all right, I saw this question. And the thing about it is that getting the questions right or wrong, when you go back and look back at the questions, they give you like a paragraph about the right answer. And
Right. Yeah.
if you right or wrong, if you go through all 35 questions and you read like, okay, I got it right, but why is it that's right? You if you've never seen any of it, apart from actually knowing some electronics, and how voltage and all that works in reality, um, you'll learn this through that one website that I got through Eric. That I learned it 100%. I mean, granted, I learned a lot from Eric through work, but the nitty gritty of it, all the rules, all the little nuances, I got straight from Ham Prep. So
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend to anybody that's getting into it.
I'll have one recommendation that was my biggest problem. It was me going too fast, right? I would look at it, and so on the app, if you tap the answer, you answer it and it scores it whether it's right or wrong, right? And I would go, oh, it's that one. And then as I'm hitting it, go, wait a minute, no, it's that one, right? And then, like, oh, I missed it,
Right.
but I knew the right one. And so that on the test, there's a lot of like milliwatts versus watts answers, right? Like, and you got to watch
Gotta watch that.
that. And I'd always hit, for some reason, I'd always hit the watts, and I was always saying milliwatts in my head. And so,
Yeah, the few that got me had to look back twice are the one about races, and
yeah,
Yeah.
the
the answer,
97.
all the answers are like, is that the right one? And then there's
Yeah,
another question that's not about races, and all the answers are, I swear, identical, but
Ari's.
it's
Yeah,
all of them apply. So,
yeah.
uh, it again, you go through it enough, and you not only see the test really, but you learn you learn the craft. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I drilled down. I studied for about a week for both, and that's why I narrowed down on it. I planned on taking all three, and I'm like, I don't have the time to do all three, so I drilled down on the two and did the two.
Yeah,
But
So-
yeah,
ham
it
radio
absolutely
prep,
will.
if you know absolutely nothing, you can take ham radio prep and pass them.
Yeah,
You just get through the material and just it makes it easy.
Like I said, I over my years, I've had people like then ham radio prep didn't exist years ago, but I remember, 2010, 11, 12, and people were getting into ham radio that I knew. And like I'd get on a repeater, and the first I'd say, "Hey man, let's switch to simplex." He's like, "You're talking Japanese to me. I have no idea what that means." I'm like, "Well, you just passed your license. What do you don't know what simplex?" And that was because people would just grab a license manual and just memorize answers, but they had no idea what they were memorizing or what
right.
this how. And I think that made a lot of. I know the Ham Radio Prep has the brain games on there, the quizzes. How fast can you do it? It'll get the answers and put these here, and it'll judge you based on the best score and all that stuff. You're right. Ham Radio Prep is I mean, they've made like tens of thousands of licensed people. And I don't want to take any more time, but I'm going to ask one question from each of you because I made a video on a couple months ago and I never got the answer or the right answer, or there is no right answer. So I'll ask each of you real quick. If for Chris and Richard, who may not know, this hobby does this hobby not to be I don't know how this is going to come out, right, but this hobby needs more younger people. A lot of the people that have done this for 40, 50 years, there's been a lot of pictures could tell you there's a lot of them that were in our club that have passed away now, and the club is going to start getting smaller. And I made a video and said, how do we get new people in? I mean, I was playing with CB radios when I was 9 years old. Chris was doing that years before. And I was the geek that when my friends wanted to go do this, I was trying to figure out how to get my Cobra 29 modded to get more power. That was just me. At 10th,
Yeah.
my 10th birthday present was a Cobra 29, But
With a Texas Star attached to it, right?
I still got a couple Texas stars in my truck. Yeah.
I have a 667 in my garage.
Yeah, yeah. So if hearing what you hear here or what we just talked about, how do you think that we could get more people interested in this? Because we've already said, hey, when everything goes down, we have a ham radio. Okay, well, nothing's going down. Now what? Well, we could play Parks on the Air. We could meet people. We can go to clubs. Well, I'm not really a social person. Okay, so where are we going to get more people? Is an easy way to do it, ham radio prep. There's radios out there that are $30 that can get people on the air now that are actually sounding pretty good now. So cost of a radio is way down from when I first started. You had to buy $600 handhelds, in 2004, and that was the only way you can get on because they didn't have Baofengs and China radios. So if we got cheaper radios and we have a really easy way to understand and get licensed, how else do we get people into this hobby so that we keep it growing? Because people are going to get older and older, and then they're going to be dying off, and then what? The hobby's going to shrink, and you know what I mean? So, Mike, what do you think about that? I'll start with you.
There you go, picking on me again.
You're on the top left.
I'm going to play devil's advocate. I don't think there is. I don't think this hobby is in any fear of dying. I just don't see it. The numbers don't lie.
Let me
I've been in sales my whole life.
you're right. Let me rephrase that though. There are people in clubs that have had clubs for 50, 100 people, and nobody new is coming into these clubs that have been large for a long
Well,
time.
sure. Well, if you're talking about clubs,
Or just, well, I mean, not even clubs. How do I put this? Ham radio operators in general. I mean, honestly, how
I
many
think
how many
the
16-year-olds
answer that you're
16-year-olds
probably
do you think
looking
are out
for,
How do you get
the
them
answer that you're
licensed?
probably looking for is what Steve Goodgame at the ARRL is spearheading right now, where he's getting ham radio into classes in school, into high schools and middle schools. And I know myself, I've always been into science and technology, kitty, uh, and just what makes things tick. But I'll blame society that I never had someone like really like kind of hone in and show me these things. And my dad, I've known about ham radio my whole life. My dad's a ham. But I never had that kind of guidance down that path, or I was just a really bad student, which is very much true. But getting this into like the STEM classes in for the kids in high school and middle school, and showing them what you can do with amateur radio, because there's so many different. It's such a broad hobby. You could spend a whole life being a ham and never cover it all. I know the things that I'm into now that are a direct result of me being into ham radio, and they're all, for the most part, like tech related or doing things, whether it's computer, learning how to solder, learning how to make an antenna, learning what frequencies you can talk on during what times a day, and this, that, and the other. Like it's a never ending thing. And I think that it is really important to start the kids in it. So that's my answer.
Yeah, so I don't get beat up in the comments, which is going to happen. What I meant, Mike is right. The ham radio hobby is not in decline. What I mean is, if you go ask an average 17-year-old right now, hey man, you got a phone, or and then maybe it's when they're 30, 40, they find interest in it. But I don't think there's too many kids these days, younger youth, that are actually interested in this. And that's where I was getting at with that.
I think the one good thing that's going on now versus like you watch movies from the 80s or maybe the late 70s, like Nerds. It was so uncool to be smart about computers and technology, where nowadays, you look at guys like Elon Musk, and like you have those kinds of role models. And as much as I hate Windows, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and
I was gonna say it's kind of hard to knock
like
Steve Jobs, right?
Yeah. Like it's cool to be that guy now, or girl.
Yeah, right.
So
what do you think, Pixie?
We need to get it into the schools, definitely, so that the kids see this.
Yeah, exactly. Richard, what do you think? You said you said your son is younger, but would you have to pitch it to him that this is how we can communicate, or does he have a general interest at a younger age of doing this?
Yeah, I think he would have an interest in this for sure. He's like I was, and probably how you were when you were 12 years old, 13 years old. I would sell it to him as a way we could like secretly communicate with each other, or like some kind of camaraderie type of thing. And especially because we don't live together. So that for me was a little quirky thing that I could pick up with my son, and just on the strength of that, it would interest him, and that might be the impetus for him to really dig down into it and share his experiences with his friends. And that could expand it as well. But to piggyback on what everyone seems to be saying is, they probably should start in school. When I was growing up at school up in New York, we had a rifle club, believe it or not, and had archery team, and we had automotive tech. You had all these other programs that are. I'm not sure if they're around now, but I know that my son's school doesn't have any of those type of things. So a little ham radio, like they have the Key Club. They could have a ham club in every school, and that would definitely, I think that would definitely make it a mainstay for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I think if they show these youth, you can interact with your computers and ham radio and talk to astronauts on the space station, or use satellite or APRS packets to a mailbox on the space station, which gets relayed around. I mean, I think that's techie
Yeah.
where you can incorporate them being on apps and stuff like that these days and put it together. So, Chris, anything?
Yeah, so I'm kind of living this. I've got a 13-year-old, right? And at first he's like, "Oh, what do you, he was, why? Oh, you put an antenna on the car? What's that about?" And why did you do that? The car looked so cool before, right? And so now driving around, he can hear people talking from around the world, right? And it's like, how cool is that, right? There's a guy from London talking to a guy in Texas, right? And so he's like, "Oh man, that is really cool." And so exposure, right? Whether it's school or hams, us letting them listen, right? And so I last night I was on one of the club frequencies and they were talking about, I didn't even know they did this, a scout. They had scouts on the air or something like
Scouts in the
that,
area.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and so they were reaching out.
Jamboree on the air is what it's called.
Yes.
Jamboree,
Yeah.
okay, Jamboree on the air.
Just
And
worked
so
a couple
that's
of them
going on,
yesterday.
I guess, today as well. So they're reaching out. That's a great way, right? That's a great thing to do. But clubs, I think, besides school, I think clubs is a great way, right? There's go to the park. There's like hay rides coming up or something for the Lake Monroe Club. And so, get the kids out there and there's going to be ham radio operators and everything out there. So just exposure, right? And
Yep.
let them see that how interesting it is to talk to somebody in Wales, while driving around. I think it's fascinating myself. So
By the way, that's at
thank
the field days. They have the get on the air station where anybody can come, a pedestrian can walk by and they can show them, hey,
oh,
they get point.
that's
The club
cool.
gets points for the go to station, get on the air, and that is like you said, exposure to get people that may say, wow, this is
Right.
okay. Now I see what they're doing because usually it was. What are you trying to talk to ET with all those antennas in your car? And now
Yeah, right.
everybody's asking me, oh man, I can't deal with another hurricane without a cell phone. I got to have a radio. So it only took
Yeah, right.
two hurricanes and 9 years of abuse to get somebody to understand what I do. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah, I think when I first heard about POTA, I was like, that doesn't really interest me because it's a quick interaction, right? It's call sign, it's a little bit of information so you can identify the station for your log. I was like, man, I would rather talk to the people, but I get it, right? It's
You can
about,
do that too. You
well,
can
I know, but
you can do your activation however you want.
yeah, I'm too competitive, so I would drop them, right?
Right.
But it's interesting because it's not just the communication; it's getting set up. It's getting this, like you said, right? Getting your kit together and everything else. So it's I get it. I'm
But
starting to like POTA a little bit more. Not that I've done it, but I've watched a lot of videos.
well, when you watch those and check out summits on the air, islands on the air, there's all kinds of them.
Okay,
There's
cool.
yeah. Tom, but I don't want to leave you out, and then I'll let everybody get back to their regularly scheduled program already in progress, which I interrupted with this call thing. Tom, anything that you think? I know you're involved with some people at clubs and stuff, and what do you think on what we just talked about?
So so that's how I got involved with amateur radio. Is they did they had three guys come in and do a like a class after school once a week. It was Mondays for an hour a week, and we did it. We got our novice and technician license over a period of a year, and we learned all kinds of different things, and you
That's
know
really
learned it from an accessible standpoint to say, okay, this is a Morse code oscillator. This is different pieces of electronics. A diode. This is what it feels like. Not that I actually would actually be able to work with one today, but they would show us different things and teach us the principles and stress the rules. Say safety and rules are everything. The operating principles are one thing, but you got to know where you are allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, and those are paramount. We were taught by World War II guys in the when I graduated in 98 99. We were taught by those World War II veterans, whereas there's certain things in their lives where they took extremely serious, and radio was one of them.
Yeah,
it's really
Because in those days, man, they lived and died by them, and that's the way it was.
yeah,
was it a
You
club?
forget. Well, no, it was in those days. It was just a couple guys that said, "Hey, we want to teach these
That's
blind
really
kids this
cool.
ham radio stuff."
Good for them.
And so they did it for a few years. I think they did a couple of rounds. I was in the first group of licensees, and they had another two or three groups after me. Tragically, like I said, those guys were really old at that time, and they didn't live too much long after we got licensed. But
That's
one satellite that I want to work one day, which I know was around when one of the guys was around. I want to work somebody in AO7. That's my goal before it goes out, is to work somebody in AO7, and I can actually say that I worked
That's
somebody
a
on the same satellite that my original Elmer did.
that's a linear satellite, right? Sideband?
I believe it is.
Yeah. That's a whole
so
nother discussion.
maybe that's what it takes, right? Is get some clubs, get some action from some clubs, in your club, get a group of guys to get to a school and see if they can go and do that after
Well, they've
school.
done it. The problem is schools have been much more restrictive now
Yeah,
Yeah,
to
that's
third
yeah. You'd
party
have to go through background
stuff than
check for
we've
three
ever.
months before you can, right?
yeah, exactly.
And even in
Well,
doing it as a, even like the doing the presentations, you can easily do a presentation of an hour long presentation, and that's all well and good. The question is how do you get the school to allow you to commit to something where it's 8 to 10 weeks or whatever it is that you want to do to get the kids educated, to get that license, and to be able to allow them to go home and say, hey, I read something about this or I read something about that. What is that? Instead of just doing an introductory session, you want to do what you got to do to get them licensed in some fashion.
yeah,
Yeah.
FYI to all these Facebookers watching, my neighborhood is telling people, hey, let's do a gardening club. Let's do a rowboat or a sailboat club. Somebody come up with an idea and have, for your neighborhoods maybe, and get one guy ham radio, and it spreads like a
Right.
wildfire in that neighborhood. Wow, we can all communicate. Like everybody in the neighborhood gets a license at that point. But all right, so this is, I think, the first time I've ever done this. I think I did an interview thing with somebody before, but I've never had six people or me plus five doing this. I appreciate you guys' time, and I just tried to get us together. There's a lot of people I know, but Tom's been licensed 25 years. I've been licensed 20. Mike's been licensed since 2018. That's 6 years. Pixie's about
16.
6 to 8 years. Pixie's been about 5 years. Richard's been a week, and Chris has been a day. So I figured that was a pretty diverse thing to go from 25 years to yesterday.
Right.
I thank you guys for
If
showing
I
up.
can ask one more
Yeah,
question
yeah, go
before,
ahead. Yeah.
Tom, how did you learn Morse code?
And so my original Morse code, when I took it, it was a requirement for the license
Gotcha.
in those days in the late 90s. And how I taught myself Morse code was we had a little computer that we used. It was called a Braille and Speak, and basically what it was a Braille version of what today would be considered like a Braille version of a laptop. They didn't even have them really in the commercial world. In those days, we had devices that sighted people even didn't have. I mean, this thing was wild, man. It had a scientific calculator. Um, it was about maybe to give you guys an idea, it was about 6 inches by 8 inches, and it had a battery, and it would last like about 15 or 18 hours on a charge. It was a NiCad battery, before lithium and all that. But and so this thing was it was built with a Z80 processor, and it was this thing called a Braille and Speak, and you would use the Braille code to type into it. And so one of the things that we did with it is I wrote a program for it, and I wrote a table with all the characters in it, the 43 characters. And it just so happened that this thing actually I could take a file, like a text file, and I could feed it into this program. And it just so happened that it had enough speed to do 5 words a minute, which is what I needed to pass my test.
That's lucky.
And
Yeah.
it did it with the right spacing and the 18 character speed and all that, the metrics that you use. And so it did that, but I didn't touch, I got my license and I didn't touch Morse code or CW for a long time after that. And so, you know, like I said in the earlier part of the deal, I went to field day the first time, and I did the HF radio. I really didn't have any exposure to HF really at that point. And I said, I got to do this. And so I went the next year, and the guy says, are you going home? And I said, no. And the guy says, good. He says, I'm going to take you over to the CW trailer. I want you to listen. And I said, well, I've sort of been practicing a little bit on my key over the last week or so. He says, oh, really? And I said, yeah. And so he says, well, show me what you got. He says, have you ever done an on-air conversation before? I says, no. I says, He says, so he started calling out letters, and I'd hit him back, with a letter. He'd say, give me a C, and I'd do it. And he'd say, give me an R, and I'd hit him with that. And so we did that for a while. And then he did it in reverse, and he would hit me with an R, and I'd say, oh, that's an S. I'm like, no, I know it's not. I know what it isn't, but I don't know what it is. And he says, okay, no problem. He says, tell you what, you do the sending, and I'll do the receiving for you. And I said, okay, no problem. So I get on the air, and he shows me, and he says, okay, we're going to do a sample contact. So he across the table, he does it with me, and I got comfortable with it and get on the air, and bang, my first contact is way out to California, the first one I ever did, and I was hooked. I said, this is it. I said, I'm not doing anything else. The only bands I actually do voice on anymore are 10 meters and 6 meters. Every other band, I don't touch them because it's too easy.
Well,
Yeah,
cool.
like I said, when I learn CW, I'll probably never pick up a mic again. So it's just it is addicting. I've seen people devote their life to the Century Club for straight keys and all that, and work thousands.
No, I prefer actually center with a straight key. Just so you guys know, I actually prefer operating with a straight key.
I prefer a paddle. Paddle is my thing. All right, guys, let me wrap this up here so we get back to whatever you guys do. I appreciate it, everybody, and I'm gonna end this recording here. And wouldn't it suck if nothing recorded, right? No, we won't say that.
Well, it
All right,
says
guys.
recording, so.
One time I did a whole thing with somebody. I was like, "Oh wow, it wasn't even recording." I was like, "Screw it, that went out the window." But it was good information for me at that point for 45 minutes.
Everybody start over.
Yeah. All right, guys, everybody, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And 7-3, everybody.
It was fun. Nice meeting everybody.
See ya.
Ham Radio Concepts is brought to you by HamRadioPrep.com. It's never been easier to learn about ham radio before you take the exam. And Ham Radio Prep makes it fun and guarantees your success. Visit HamRadioPrep.com. Use the code ERIC20 to instantly save 20% off every course you buy. Remember the name, HamRadioPrep.com.